First contact and cultural confusion. The Terran Defense Force vessel Audacity lived up to its name in ways that made Commander Maya Rodriguez both proud and slightly nervous. As she stood on the bridge watching her crew prepare for their first venture beyond mapped space, she couldn't help but appreciate the irony of humanity's approach to deep space exploration. Build the most advanced ships possible, staff them with the best crews available, and then send them off to do things that probably shouldn't be attempted in the first place. Final systems check complete, Commander, announced Lieutenant Raj Patel from his station, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The quantum fold drive is purring like a kitten. Well, like a kitten that occasionally breaks the laws of physics. Maya nodded, suppressing a smile. The quantum fold drive was humanity's latest breakthrough in FTL technology, developed after some junior physicists noticed that space-time had the equivalent of a rounding error in its calculations. Rather than try to brute force their way through space like most science fiction had predicted, humans had essentially found a way to exploit a loophole in reality itself. "Status of the escort ships?" she asked, turning to her tactical officer. "Ingenuity and determination report ready, Commander," replied Lieutenant Sarah Chen. "Though Ingenuity's chief engineer wants us to know they've made some improvements to their drive." "Do I want to know what kind of improvements?" "Probably not, Mom." Maya sighed. That was the thing about human engineers. Give them a perfectly functional piece of equipment, and they'd immediately start thinking of ways to make it better, regardless of whether such improvements were strictly necessary or even advisable. The patrol fleet's mission was straightforward enough. Push beyond the boundaries of known space, establish contact with any civilizations they encountered, and try not to accidentally start an interstellar incident. Simple, really. At least until the sensors lit up like a Christmas tree. "Multiple contacts," Chen announced, her voice sharp with surprise. "Massive energy signatures, unlike anything in our database. They're geometric." The main view screen filled with the image of what appeared to be a fleet of perfectly cubic vessels, each one gleaming with a metallic sheen that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. They were arranged in a formation so precise it could have been used to calibrate measuring equipment. "Are they hailing us?" Maya asked, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. "No, ma'am," replied Communications Officer David Torres. "But they're broadcasting something. It sounds like, is that a filing system?" Before Maya could process that particular piece of information, one of the cubic vessels shifted position slightly, exactly 50 degrees to port, if their sensors were to be believed, and a beam of light swept over the Audacity. "They're scanning us," Chen reported, "very thoroughly. I think they're counting our bolts." The silence that followed was broken by a transmission that made every human on the bridge blink in confusion. A voice that somehow managed to sound both mechanical and deeply offended spoke in perfect, if oddly formal, English. "Attention unauthorized vessels. Your ship designs violate exactly 2,347 regulations regarding geometric efficiency and standardized construction protocols. Furthermore, your energy signatures indicate the use of non-approved faster-than-light travel methods. Please prepare for immediate inspection and filing of the appropriate non-compliance forms. Resistance will result in additional paperwork." Maya exchanged looks with her bridge crew, noting the barely suppressed grins on several faces. Of all the first contact scenarios they had trained for, being cited for violations of an alien building code hadn't been one of them. "Open a channel," she ordered, straightening her uniform out of habit. The view screen flickered to life, revealing what appeared to be a control room staffed by tall, silvery beings whose bodies seemed to be composed of interlocking geometric shapes. The one in the center, presumably the commander, had more angles than the others. "This is Commander Maya Rodriguez of the TDF Audacity," she began, using her best diplomatic voice. "We come in peace and friendship from Earth, seeking to establish peaceful contact with other civilizations." "Peace is irrelevant," the geometric being replied. Proper documentation is paramount. I am Efficiency Director, First Grade Vertex 7 Alpha of the Regularity Enforcement Fleet. You will submit to immediate inspection and complete Form 7249B. Application for retroactive design variants. Maya felt a headache coming on. I'm afraid we don't have access to your forms, she said carefully. Perhaps we could discuss this over a more informal. The alien's angles somehow became even sharper. There is nothing informal about regulatory compliance. Your vessel's complete disregard for proper geometric principles threatens the very fabric of standardized space travel protocols. At that moment, a junior engineer who had been running diagnostics on the quantum fold drive accidentally activated what they had been calling the probability hiccup, a side effect of the drive that temporarily caused nearby space to experience quantum uncertainty on a macro scale. The result was immediate and spectacular. The perfectly cubic alien vessels briefly wobbled, their immaculate shapes distorting like reflections in a funhouse mirror. A chorus of what could only be described as geometric screaming emanated from the communication channel. What? Vertex 7 Alpha's voice seemed to crack. What have you done? The angles. The perfect angles. Maya shot a warning look at her crew, who were trying very hard not to laugh. Our apologies, she said smoothly. Sometimes our technology has unexpected effects. Perhaps we could discuss this over refreshments. We could explain our engineering principles, and you could tell us more about your regulatory requirements. There was a long pause as the alien commander seemed to struggle with this proposal. Finally, it spoke again, its voice slightly less rigid. You achieved faster-than-light travel through methods that deliberately exploit uncertainties in spatial mathematics. Well, we prefer to think of it as creative problem-solving, Maya replied diplomatically. Another pause. This will require special forms. Many special forms. The alien actually shuddered. But perhaps a discussion would be appropriate. Your species' apparent ability to function despite complete geometric chaos is fascinating. As arrangements were made for a meeting, Maya couldn't help but smile. Humanity's first contact with an advanced alien civilization was going to be a lesson in bureaucracy versus creativity. She had a feeling both sides were about to learn some very interesting lessons about different ways of thinking. And if nothing else, she thought as she watched her engineer try to explain why human ships included aesthetic considerations in their design to an increasingly distressed alien bureaucrat, it was going to make for one hell of a report. The language of innovation. The meeting room aboard the Regularity Enforcement vessel, Perfect Symmetry, was, unsurprisingly, a perfect cube. Commander Maya Rodriguez sat at a mathematically precise angle from Efficiency Director Vertex 7 Alpha, trying not to smile as she watched Lieutenant Patel attempt to explain the concept of winging it to a panel of increasingly distressed alien engineers. So you're telling us, one of the geometric beings said, its edges vibrating with what might have been horror, that you deliberately introduced random variables into your faster-than-light calculations. Not random, Paddle corrected, gesturing enthusiastically at his holographic display. More like controlled chaos. See, we noticed that the universe gets a bit fuzzy around the edges if you look at it just right. Instead of fighting that, we decided to work with it. Work with chaos. The alien's perfect angles seem to droop slightly, but the regulations clearly state that all spatial manipulation must follow standard template 742X, which requires precisely calculated. Yeah, about that, Paddle interrupted, pulling up a new diagram. We tried the precise calculation route. Turns out the universe has a sense of humor. The more perfectly you try to measure something, the more it decides to mess with you. So we basically said, fine, you want to be weird. Let's get weird together. Maya watched as the alien engineers huddled together, their geometric forms clustering in what she assumed was their version of an emergency conference. Vertex 7 Alpha turned all of its angles toward her. Commander Rodriguez, it said, its mechanical voice carrying a note she hadn't heard before. Was that curiosity? Your species' approach to physics is disturbing, and yet undeniably effective. Our sensors indicate your quantum fold drive achieves efficiency ratings that should be theoretically impossible. We get that a lot. Maya replied diplomatically. Impossible just means we haven't figured out the workaround yet. Before the efficiency director could respond, alarms began blaring throughout both ships. Lieutenant Chen's voice came through Maya's communicator. Commander, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations in nearby space. Something's coming through. And it's big. The meeting room's viewing screen activated, showing a massive tear in space-time. Through it emerged a vessel that made both human and geometric alien observers pause in confusion. It appeared to be constantly shifting between different forms, never settling on a single shape. Fascinating, Vertex 7 Alpha said, its voice carrying both dread and awe. A quantum flux entity. We've only encountered them in theoretical calculations. I'm guessing they're not friendly. Maya asked, noting how the geometric beings were drawing themselves into even more precise formations, as if perfect angles could protect them. They are beyond concepts of friendship or hostility, the efficiency director replied. They exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, making them impossible to categorize or file properly. All attempts at communication have failed due to their inherently chaotic nature. Maya watched as the shifting vessel approached, its very presence seeming to distort the fabric of reality around it. Then she noticed something interesting about the patterns of its transformations. Those aren't random changes, she said suddenly, causing several geometric beings to turn their angles toward her. There's a pattern there, not a regular one, but like jazz. Jazz? Vertex 7 Alpha's voice managed to convey complete bewilderment despite its mechanical tone. Human music form, emphasis on improvisation and rhythm. Maya explained quickly. Lieutenant Torres, can you analyze those shift patterns for mathematical correlations with musical frequencies? The communications officer's fingers flew across his console. Already on it, Commander. You're right. There's a definite rhythmic pattern. It's complex, but it follows something similar to our own musical scales, just operating on quantum levels instead of sound waves. They're not being chaotic, Maya realized, excitement building. They're dancing. Patel, what happens if we use the quantum fold drive's probability hiccup in a controlled pattern? Could we match their rhythm? The engineer's eyes lit up. Oh, that's brilliant. We could modulate the drive's uncertainty field to create a quantum harmony. It's completely insane, but it might just work. You cannot be suggesting, Vertex 7 Alpha interjected, its edges sharp with alarm, that we attempt to communicate with a quantum flux entity by making our ships dance. Got a better idea? Maya asked, already signaling her crew to begin preparations. The geometric being's angles shifted in what might have been resignation. The forms required for this will be unprecedented. Working together, the human engineers and geometric alien technicians began modifying their ship's systems. The humans contributed their understanding of musical theory and improvisational patterns, while the geometric beings provided precise control over quantum field manipulations. The result was something entirely new. A quantum symphony created by ships pulsing their drive fields in carefully coordinated patterns. At first, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the quantum flux entity's transformations began to sync with their broadcast rhythm. Its shifting forms took on a more deliberate quality, like a dancer finding the beat. They're responding, Torres announced excitedly. The pattern of their shifts is matching our quantum frequency. I think they're trying to communicate. The next few hours were a crash course in quantum mechanics meets musical theory. The human's natural ability to recognize and adapt to rhythms, combined with the geometric being's precise control over quantum fields, allowed them to establish a basic form of communication with the entity. As it turned out, the quantum flux entities weren't hostile at all. They were explorers, artists of a sort, who shaped reality itself into what they considered beautiful patterns. They had been trying to communicate through their quantum dance all along, but no one had recognized it as communication until now. "I must admit," Vertex 7 Alpha said later, as they watched the entity perform what could only be described as a quantum ballet, "your species' tendency to find patterns in chaos has proven unexpectedly valuable. And your ability to precisely control quantum fields made it possible to actually communicate with them," Maya pointed out. "Looks like chaos and order work better together than apart." The geometric being's angles shifted in what Maya was starting to recognize as their version of thoughtful consideration. Perhaps we should establish a joint research initiative. Your creative approach to physics, combined with our precise methodology. The possibilities are intriguing. We'll probably have to fill out a lot of forms for that, won't we?" Maya asked, unable to resist. "Oh, yes," Vertex 7 Alpha replied, and she could have sworn there was a note of enthusiasm in its mechanical voice. "We'll need to create entirely new categories of forms. It will be gloriously organized chaos." As Maya watched her crew and the geometric beings begin planning their collaboration, she reflected that perhaps this was what space exploration was really about, not just finding new life, but finding new ways to understand each other, even when one side thought in perfect angles, and the other specialized in breaking physics in creative ways. The quantum entity continued its dance against the backdrop of stars, a living reminder that in the vast universe, there was room for both precision and improvisation. Unexpected defenders. The Joint Human Geometric Research Station Orderly Chaos was a testament to compromise. One half consisted of perfect geometric shapes arranged with mathematical precision, while the other featured the more organic curves and asymmetrical designs favored by human architects. The result looked like someone had tried to merge a crystal and a wave, but somehow it worked. Commander Maya Rodriguez stood in the central observation dome, watching a quantum flux entity perform what the station's scientists had dubbed a probability dance, with several modified probe drones. In the 3 months since first contact, both species had learned more about quantum mechanics than they had in decades of separate research. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen's voice carried an edge that immediately got Maya's attention. "Long-range sensors are picking up something. Odd." "Odd how?" Maya asked, already moving toward the command center. After dealing with geometric aliens and quantum dancers, her definition of odd had expanded considerably. "It's like holes in space, dozens of them, moving in formation toward the nearest populated systems." The command center's main display showed the sensor data. Dark patches were appearing in space, perfect voids that seemed to swallow light itself. They moved with purpose, following paths that somehow managed to be both erratic and coordinated. Vertex 7 Alpha's angles shifted in what Maya had learned was their equivalent of a frown. "These readings match no known phenomena in our extensively categorized database of spatial anomalies. Could they be natural?" Maya asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Negative," replied Patel from his station. "The movement patterns are too deliberate. Someone or something is creating these voids." As if in response to his words, the nearest void suddenly expanded, swallowing an unmanned sensor platform. The data burst it transmitted in its final moments showed nothing. Not darkness, not empty space, but a complete absence of everything, including physical laws themselves. "Well, that's not good," Maya muttered. "Options. Standard weapons would be useless," Chen reported. "Can't shoot what isn't there. And the geometric fleet's quantum lockdown fields won't work on something that ignores physics." "Perhaps," Vertex 7 Alpha interjected, its mechanical voice carrying an unusual note of uncertainty, "we should consider implementing Emergency Protocol 957X, organized retreat, and comprehensive documentation." "You mean run away and file a report?" Maya translated. "A precisely coordinated strategic withdrawal," the geometric being corrected primly. Before they could debate further, one of the voids changed course, heading directly for a nearby colony world. Population: 12 million. No time for protocols, Maya decided. Paddle, remember that theoretical modification you were working on for the quantum fold drive? The one that made the safety officers from both our species twitch. The engineer's eyes lit up. The probability cascade. But that's completely untested. It could tear a hole in reality itself. Given that we're already dealing with holes in reality, that might not be a bad thing, Maya pointed out. How fast can you get it ready? You cannot be suggesting. Vertex 7 Alpha interrupted, its angles practically vibrating with alarm. That we deliberately destabilize local spacetime as a defense strategy. The forms required for such an action don't even exist. Then we'll make new forms, Maya said firmly. After we save that colony. What followed was perhaps the fastest collaboration between humans and geometric beings ever recorded. Human engineers worked alongside geometric technicians, combining the precision of one species with the creative instincts of the other. They modified the quantum fold drives of both human and geometric ships, turning them into what Paddle cheerfully described as reality hiccup generators. The plan was either brilliant or insane, depending on one's perspective. They would use the modified drives to create controlled cascades of probability fluctuations, essentially making small areas of space so uncertain that even nothingness couldn't exist there stably. Think of it like fighting fire with fire, Maya explained to a group of geometric officers. Or in this case, fighting holes in reality with our own holes in reality. Just friendlier holes. The concept of friendly holes in reality is not covered by any existing regulatory framework, one of the officers noted. This is highly irregular. Story of my life, Maya replied with a grim smile. The first test of their hastily assembled defense came as the void ships approached the colony. A combined fleet of human and geometric vessels took up position, their modified drives humming with barely contained chaos. Ready to make physics cry, Patil asked from his engineering station. Execute, Maya ordered. The quantum fold drives activated in sequence, creating a web of probability cascades. Where they intersected, reality became less of a rigid set of rules and more of a set of suggestions. The void ships encountered this defensive network and hesitated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as the cascades intensified, the voids began to waver. It was like watching oil droplets hit water. They couldn't maintain their coherence in the face of such fundamental uncertainty. It's working, Chen reported excitedly. The voids are destabilizing. They're getting probability hiccups, Patel finished with obvious delight. The void ships tried to press forward, but each time they encountered a cascade intersection, they became less stable. Finally, with what seemed like a silent shudder, they began to retreat. We did it, Maya breathed, hardly believing it had worked. We actually did it. Indeed, Vertex 7 Alpha agreed, its mechanical voice carrying what might have been pride. Though I shudder to think of the paperwork this will generate. We'll need to create an entirely new classification system just to document what happened here. As they watched the void ships retreat, Maya reflected on how far both species had come. The geometric beings were learning to embrace a little chaos, while humans were learning the value of precision in their improvisation. Together, they had done something neither could have managed alone. You know, she said to Vertex 7 Alpha, we still don't know what those things were or where they came from. A mystery, the geometric being agreed, one that will require extensive research, careful documentation, and probably several violations of known physics to solve. Sounds like fun, Maya grinned. Commander Rodriguez, your species' definition of fun continues to both intrigue and disturb me. There was definitely a note of amusement in the mechanical voice now. I look forward to filing the appropriate forms for our next adventure. As the fleet began recovery operations, Maya couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out there, the void ships were probably reconsidering their invasion plans, After all, how do you conquer a galaxy defended by beings crazy enough to weaponize probability itself? Breaking protocol. The success of the probability cascade defense had unexpected consequences for both human and geometric society. The main conference room of the orderly chaos station was currently hosting what had to be the strangest bureaucratic procedure in galactic history. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Maya said, staring at the holographic display of what appeared to be a three-dimensional flowchart that somehow extended into at least two additional dimensions she couldn't quite perceive. "You want to create a new department. The Department of Controlled Chaos and Innovative Irregularities." Vertex 7 Alpha confirmed, its mechanical voice carrying what she now recognized as enthusiasm. "With joint leadership from both our species, of course. The recent void ship incident has made it clear that we need a formal structure for handling unconventional solutions. You want to institutionalize breaking the rules." Maya couldn't help but smile. That's possibly the most human thing I've ever heard a geometric being suggest. "We prefer to think of it as establishing guidelines for controlled deviations from standard protocols." Another geometric being, designated Analysis Prime Beta, interjected. "With appropriate documentation, of course." "Of course," Maya agreed solemnly, catching Patel's eye across the room. The engineer was clearly struggling not to laugh. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from one of the joint patrol fleets. The main screen activated to show a harried-looking human captain alongside a geometric commander whose angles seemed distinctly ruffled. "Command, we've encountered something unusual," the human captain reported. "We were testing the new probability cascade generators when we accidentally, well, we appear to have created a temporary recursive loop in causality." The geometric commander finished. "Local time is now flowing in several directions simultaneously. The required forms for this situation do not exist." Maya and Vertex 7 Alpha exchanged looks. "How did this happen?" they asked simultaneously. "Well," the human captain looked sheepish. "We were trying to improve the efficiency of the cascade generators by adding some geometric precision to the quantum fluctuations. It worked a little too well. Now we have a situation where Tuesday is happening before Monday, but also after Wednesday, and somehow last Thursday is involved. The temporal mathematics are perfect," the geometric commander added, sounding almost offended. "They're just perfect in several contradictory ways at once." Before anyone could respond, another alert came in, this time from a research outpost where human and geometric scientists had been studying the quantum flux entities. "Good news," a bright-eyed researcher announced. "We've successfully taught the quantum dancers to understand bureaucratic procedures." "Bad news, they're now filling out forms in 11 dimensions, and the paperwork is technically happening before it's submitted." Maya watched as Vertex 7 Alpha's angles twitched in what she had learned was their version of a headache. "Perhaps," the geometric being said carefully, "we should consider expanding the scope of our new department." The next few weeks saw a flurry of activity as both species worked to adapt to their new reality. Geometric beings began studying human concepts like winging it and improvisation, while humans learned the value of documenting their chaos properly. The results were interesting. A human engineer and geometric technician team discovered that by applying perfectly calculated uncertainty to their quantum fold drives, they could achieve faster-than-light travel that was simultaneously more efficient and less likely to accidentally create temporal paradoxes. They celebrated their success by inventing a new form that could be filed in any order while remaining chronologically accurate. The quantum flux entities, fascinated by this merger of order and chaos, began hanging around the station more frequently. They seemed particularly interested in the geometric beings' attempts to categorize and document types of quantum uncertainty, often contributing their own suggestions through elaborate probability dances. "It's remarkable," Maya commented one day, watching a group of geometric junior officers attempting to learn what they called controlled imprecision from a human instructor. "A few months ago, Your species would have considered all of this a violation of natural law. We still do, Vertex 7 Alpha replied, its mechanical voice carrying a note of what might have been humor. We're just learning that sometimes violating natural law is the most natural thing to do. Though I must admit, creating violation report forms for violations we're officially encouraging is creating some fascinating paradoxes in our filing system. The conversation was interrupted by yet another alert. A joint exploration team had discovered what appeared to be ancient ruins that existed in a quantum superposition, simultaneously being thousands of years old and not yet built. Should we dispatch a research team? Maya asked, already knowing the answer. Of course, Vertex 7 Alpha replied. But first, we need to create a new form category for temporal spatial archaeological irregularities, predicted past/future findings. As they worked on the paperwork, which now included sections for both precise measurements and educated guesses, Maya reflected on how far they'd come. The geometric beings were learning that sometimes the best solution was no solution at all, while humans were discovering that even chaos could benefit from a little organization. The void ships hadn't been seen since their retreat, but somehow Maya suspected they weren't the last strange thing humanity and their geometric allies would face together. The galaxy was full of mysteries that didn't fit neatly into either species' worldview, but perhaps that was the point. You know, she said to Vertex 7 Alpha as they finished the last form, which now included a section for anticipated retroactive modifications, I think we might be creating something entirely new here. Not just a department or a partnership, but a whole new way of approaching the universe. Indeed, the geometric being agreed. Though I do have one concern. Oh, we're going to need a bigger filing system. Maya laughed, and she could have sworn she saw Vertex 7 Alpha's angles shift in what was becoming their species' version of a smile. Around them, the orderly Chaos Station continued its operations, a living symbol of what could happen when precision and creativity learned to dance together, even if the dance occasionally broke physics and required forms in multiple dimensions. The greater galaxy. 1 year after the first contact between humans and geometric beings, the orderly Chaos Station had become something of a legend in both civilizations. It was the place where the impossible was not only possible but properly documented in triplicate, where reality itself was treated more like a set of guidelines than actual rules, and where the most unlikely partnership in the galaxy had somehow become a model for the future. Commander Maya Rodriguez stood in her favorite spot in the observation dome, watching a scene that would have been impossible to explain to anyone from a year ago. A group of geometric beings was engaged in what they called precision improvisation, with several quantum flux entities, their movements creating patterns in reality itself that were both mathematically perfect and completely unpredictable. Status report ready, Commander, Lieutenant Chen announced, approaching with a datapad. Though I should warn you, parts of it technically haven't happened yet, and other parts happened last week, but only became relevant tomorrow. Just another day at the office. Maya smiled, taking the pad. How's the new Joint Defense Initiative coming along? Before Chen could answer, multiple alarms began blaring throughout the station. The main display activated to show something that made even the quantum flux entities pause their dance. A massive tear in space-time, far larger than anything they'd seen before. Well, Maya said dryly, I guess the void ships found some friends. Through the tear came something that defied description in any single frame of reference. It was as if someone had taken the concept of a fleet and removed all the parts that made sense, leaving only the impossible bits behind. The vessels, if they could be called that, seemed to exist in the spaces between spaces. Fascinating, Vertex 7 Alpha commented, gliding into the command center. They appear to be operating on principles that actively deny the existence of principles. This will require an entirely new category of regulatory violations. Priority is defense, Maya reminded them, though she couldn't help but smile at the geometric being's response. All stations, implement protocol uncertainty. What followed was perhaps the strangest battle in galactic history. The combined human geometric fleet moved into position, their quantum fold drives modified with what Patel had dubbed controlled chaos amplifiers. The quantum flux entities, now official allies thanks to some very creative paperwork, took up flanking positions. The Void Fleet struck first, sending waves of unreality that threatened to erase everything they touched from existence. But this time, the defenders were ready. Initiate probability cascade, Maya ordered. Geometric precision teams, coordinate with human chaos units. Let's show them what organized entropy looks like. The defenders' ships began moving in patterns that somehow managed to be both perfectly calculated and completely random. Each vessel's quantum fold drive pulsed in sequence, creating a web of controlled uncertainty that made reality itself flutter like a flag in the wind. But the Void Fleet was stronger this time. They pushed through the initial defense, their non-existence threatening to overwhelm the station's existence. "Commander," Patel's voice carried both excitement and anxiety. "I have an idea. It's completely insane, probably impossible, and will definitely violate at least 30 fundamental laws of physics. My favorite kind of idea." Maya grinned. "Vertex 7 Alpha." The geometric beam's angles shifted in what had become their equivalent of a resigned smile. "I have already begun preparing the necessary violation reports and reality disturbance documentation forms." Patel's plan was audacious even by their new standards. They would use the station's massive quantum fold drive array, combined with the geometric being's precise control systems and the quantum flux entity's natural ability to manipulate reality, to create what he called a probability singularity. "Think of it like a black hole," he explained rapidly, "but instead of consuming matter and energy, it consumes uncertainty itself. Everything within its range becomes simultaneously all possibilities and no possibility." "That's impossible," one of the geometric technicians noted. "I approve. Where do I sign?" The Void Fleet seemed to sense what they were planning. They increased their assault, pushing harder against the defenders' lines. Reality began to strain under the competing forces of existence and non-existence. "All units in position," Chen reported. "Quantum flux entities signal ready. Geometric precision teams standing by." "Do it," Maya ordered. The station's quantum fold drive spun up to speeds that shouldn't have been possible, guided by geometric calculations that somehow managed to be precisely imprecise. The quantum flux entities began their most complex dance yet, weaving probability itself into patterns that hurt to look at. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened, all at once and not at all. The probability singularity bloomed like a flower made of possibility itself. Where it touched the void ships, they found themselves existing in too many ways to maintain their non-existence. Reality rushed in to fill the gaps, and the impossible fleet found itself becoming possible, and therefore subject to the laws of physics they had been trying to ignore. "Status," Maya called out, once reality had settled back into something resembling its normal shape. "The Void Fleet has been normalized," Chen reported, sounding somewhat amazed. "They're just regular ships now. Very strange-looking ships, but ships nonetheless. We're receiving surrender signals in. Is that interpretive dance? The quantum flux entities are translating." Vertex 7 Alpha confirmed. "Apparently, our opponents were a species that had evolved in the spaces between realities. They thought our universe was invading their non-space. A simple misunderstanding then," Maya said. "One that led to us basically inventing new laws of physics to handle." "Indeed," the geometric being agreed. "Though I must say, the paperwork for first contact with beings from outside reality itself will be unprecedented. We may need to create a new dimension just to file it properly." As the cleanup began and diplomatic channels were established with their former enemies, Maya reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had learned that sometimes the best way to think outside the box was to first understand exactly what the box was made of. The geometric beings had discovered that chaos could be measured and uncertainty could be calculated, And together, they had created something entirely new. A civilization that danced on the edge of possibility, while keeping careful records of where all the edges were. "You know," she said to Vertex 7 Alpha as they watched the quantum flux entities teach some of the normalized void beings how to probability dance, "I think we've fundamentally changed how both our species see the universe." "Correction," the geometric being replied, its mechanical voice warm. "We have changed how the universe sees itself. The forms required to document this change will be absolutely magnificent." Maya laughed, and around them, reality itself seemed to chuckle along, now more flexible and more structured than ever before. In the end, it turned out that the greatest adventure wasn't just exploring the galaxy. It was learning to see it through each other's eyes, even if some of those eyes were geometric and others saw it in quantum probability states. And somewhere in the station's vast database, in a file that existed in several dimensions at once, a new entry was being made. Probability of future impossible adventures, 100%, plus or minus a carefully calculated degree of uncertainty. The galaxy would never be the same. It would be better.